What's up, Movement Masters? It's Shawn, Myszka, Movement Master, and OptimizeMovement.com coming to you with another movement lesson. You know, it's an obvious statement and point to make that most masterful movers in open stimuli type sports are those that are able to carry out the most optimal of biomechanical behavioral strategies in the ever-changing conditions of the environment of sport. And we don't have to look that much further to see that even mastery in sports which are more pre-programmed, closed, or repetitive and cyclical in nature, in their technical execution of movement, still require the athlete to have full ownership and control of their body in both space and time in order to carry out the rest of the displayed characteristics in biodynamic structure when and where it counts, which is in their sport. The only way for either one of these things to occur is for athletes to make mistakes in training. And I'm going to argue in this video that as movement specialists, you should look for ways to allow athletes to do just that, to make frequent mistakes in training and even encourage it to occur. You know, this is going to sound counterintuitive to most, so let me explain a little bit further. There are numerous mistakes that can occur in training that are both disadvantageous or advantageous depending on the type of individual that we're talking about. You often hear me talk about perfect practice, but really when it comes down to it, making mistakes in movement, I am going to tell you, is really perfect practice. There's benefits to this. Number one, the athlete will learn how to handle variability in sport environment conditions. This is first and foremost. Number two, athletes will start to increase exploration of movement strategies that they might not presently employ. In this, I'm talking about both cognitively speaking, cognitive perceptual decision making, as well as the use of certain biomechanical positions that they typically don't employ because maybe they want to get set in their ways, their complacent, comfortable ways. But the use of different strategies and positions may actually be more advantageous, and without allowing them to make mistakes, we'll never figure out if those things are actually more advantageous. The third and final benefit that I see from making mistakes in the movement practice and movement training is it helps the athlete learn right from wrong or optimal from suboptimal. It allows them to get the sensory feelings and the control that go with each of those, both right and wrong or optimal and suboptimal. All of these things then combine together to not only increase movement ownership, but it also allows the movement working mechanisms to increase in the technical execution. And finally, it allows movement skill to improve through the increase of myelination. There's numerous ways that we can look to actually incorporate mistakes in our movement practices and training. But first and foremost, it's going to require you to change your own mindset, because in many cases, athletes are going to be overly cautious about mistakes. And now, if we're going to try to encourage mistakes to occur, this is only within reason. We still must maintain a movement quality standard. And if you realize that the athlete is making a laundry list of mistakes, but nothing is happening in order to have a more deliberate intention and attention towards those mistakes, and the errors are not being detected, or then you're creating a strategy for countering that mistake, then that's too much happening at once and you're trying to lay down bad movement patterns and behaviors. So I would tell you to frequently ask the athlete, how does that feel, or what did you feel there? Okay? This will encourage more sensory of the athlete and more ownership of the athlete. Finally, we can set up certain constraints or a constraints-led approach of training drills which will require additional problem solving from the athlete. That's probably my favorite way in order to increase the amount of mistakes that athletes are required to make in the training. By increasing problem solving, we're going to make sure that that athlete starts to get control and ownership and start to understand the feelings that go along with right versus wrong. But really here, we got to make sure that when we inject mistakes in training, it matches not only the sport demands and the sport task demands, but also it matches the athlete's level of movement mastery. Because if we don't do that, we're going to see compensations in the habits and the behaviors, and then that are going to show themselves into patterns that we might be actually risking more harm than good. So this is a fine line to walk. But we must remember a few things, two main points in particular. First is that the mistakes in movement should never be the result of fatigue, weakness, improperly designed movement tasks, or a lack of focus on the athlete's part. If any one of those things occur, we're just likely to lay down bad habits and compensations, further compensations to occur if the athlete is working out when they're weak, or when the drill is too intense or complex for them, or if the athlete isn't taking deliberate intention and attention towards the task and drill at hand. The second reminder or thing to always keep in mind and remember when you're trying to have a mistakes, constraints-led approach towards movement training is that it's going to require a totally different and accepting mentality on both the athlete's part as well as on your part. And if you don't do this, both of you are going to be maybe a little overzealous in regards to those mistakes that are occurring, and the athlete will still end up being too cautious. All in all, what we need to realize is that the practice of movement, or the process for attaining movement mastery, doesn't always mean perfect practice, okay? What we have to think about is practicing perfectly, and that requires you to allow that athlete to gain ownership, to become a virtuous mover, and to account for the mistakes that can happen based on the variable conditions found within the sporting environment. So it's an important topic to think about, and it's one that you should look to kind of take your athletes on a journey with and allow for those mistakes, encourage mistakes, and realize that it's going to relate to an increase in movement skill and movement mastery in most cases. So for another movement lesson, this has been Shawn Myszka, Movement Master and OptimizeMovement.com. I'll talk to you guys on the flip side. Till next time, let's go out and get it, and let's all continue to master the art of optimizing movement.